And we are live. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. How's everyone doing today? So, today we're going to be having a conversation centering around the relationship between Hollywood, cancel culture, and McCarthyism. Um, I believe that this is going to be a very interesting conversation. So, I want you to just, try as much as possible to participate in this conversation. Leave your comments in the comment section, and we will try to respond to as many questions as we can get, and possibly later on open up the stream so other people can call into this stream. So please like the stream once you're coming in. Just like the stream; it will help the algorithm to show this video to much more people. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and if you're up to it, you can support the stream with with a super chat or a super sticker to just encourage us in what we're doing. So speaking as someone from the outside, I when I look at Hollywood, I see Hollywood as a sort of a tool or a mechanism for the dispensing of American ideas. It's one of the ways in which American ideas goes around the world. A lot of people, what they think of America, what their conception of what America is usually gotten from what they've seen in Hollywood. And I don't know how much of that is reflective of what really happens down in America, but I do know that Hollywood has a lot of cultural influence. I do know that they have a lot of power. So, if Hollywood is in a certain way, is it possible that they are shaping American thoughts, they're shaping American society? And how does that relate to this new phenomenon of cancel culture where people are being cancelled for having an opinion, even though the opinion is might be controversial? But I doubt if it had always been the case that opinions were grounds for someone being fired or someone having their lives destroyed. Then coming over to McCarthyism, which we're still going to touch on and see how it ties it neatly into even communism and these other two concepts, where there's sort of a way of trying to subvert a country and destroy it from within. So I have with me today someone from Voice of Free America, E. E is in our Discord, and we talk about all these issues a lot. So, E, just say hello to my audience.
Hello.
Yeah.
Um,
So, welcome to the conversation, E. So, E, your title is Voice of Free America. Do you want to tell us what, what's the relationship between that idea, Voice of Free America, and yourself?
Literally, the American voice is getting silenced. I stand proclaiming myself to be the voice of free America because I'm the person who refuses to be silenced. I'm the one who's willing to speak the controversial view and get freaking slaughtered so that the truth can get out there.
So, when you say that America's voice is being silenced, could you put it in context? Who is trying to silence Americans' voice? Who are they, and by what mechanisms are they doing that?
It's the communists. They literally want to silence free speech.
That's a big claim to say that the communist. And if you're looking at the world today, I think about North Korea is about the only truly communist state in existence today. So are you saying North Korea is trying to subvert the American society?
No, I'm saying that the American communist is trying to subvert American society, in which
Oh,
the Hollywood communists were created by the Soviet Union. I'd like to start off with a couple quotes that will be paramount to what I'm trying to tell everybody is going on in Hollywood. The first one being a quote from Vladimir Lenin: "Of all the arts, for us, the cinema is most important." And the other one is from a man named Richard Grenier. I think you pronounce his name. In the dialectic of the Hollywood left, capitalism is evil. Except for the three picture deal with Paramount, the Malibu mansion, the swimming pool and tennis court, the Mercedes Benz. Or, as Marx would have put it, from each according to his credulity, to each according to his greed.
Hmm. So, do you want to break down that those quotes you just made? Do you want to break them down for us?
Okay, on the Vladimir Lenin one, the cinema is most important to the communists because for the longest time, the cinema was the attention grabber. It was what was used to feed us propaganda. I mean, look at the movie Blockade, starring Henry Fonda. Yeah, Henry Fonda. It was a piece of obvious communist uh, propaganda, so obvious that nobody was willing to watch it a second time.
Mm.
I mean, pure and simple.
S-
In
That's
America,
that's 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 interesting.
in America, the
Yes.
communists are
Please,
literally
if
trying
I
to
won't
keep
keep my rabbit, go and check.
the cap or the in America, the communist is after power. And with the power, all the perks, including wealth.
But is it
With
just
the
the communities
second,
after power? I mean, everyone is after power.
yeah, but like I was saying, they're hypocrites when going about it. With the second quote, they call capitalism evil, but yet they demand more and more money from movie studios. They demand, or they buy huge mansions with swimming pools and tennis courts. They buy themselves the most expensive cars that they can get. I mean, look at Arnold, for example. He always drives the biggest SUV or truck he can get as a symbol of his wealth and power.
Okay, so explore the second quote that you made. Explore it for me.
Yeah, basically, the Hollywood left will call capitalism evil, all the while demanding huge amounts of money from Hollywood or from the Hollywood studios to be in their pictures. And then they use that to buy huge mansions, kind of similar to Patrice Concouler. And I'm trying to remember who it was in BLM Canada who bought the Communist Party mansion there. But yeah, they literally sell out their credit, their street cred for wealth and power. They don't try to accumulate it on their own, they sell it to whoever's willing to them give it to them. They will sell out anybody or anything at a moment's notice to get wealth and power.
Mm. So, these American communists are they sort of aboriginal communists? As they have they always been in America, or there was sort of an infiltration from outside that bred these current so-called communists in America?
Yes, it started back in the 20s and 30s with the Soviet Union. And it's
Okay.
not just Hollywood, it's also been the news media.
And what's their goal? What's exactly their goal?
They basically want to throw us into their idea of what a government should be a communist American government, one where they have all the wealth, they have all the power, and everybody is reliant on them instead of reliant on themselves. They don't want people to be able to rise up against them. We just saw that with the trampling that occurred in Canada, in which the Soviet Union had been building freaking communist groups in other nations since as long as Stalin at least has had power. Some of them Vladimir Lenin. I mean,
But
heck, here's a
but
good example. California
okay.
Congresswoman Helen Gallahan Douglas was a member of a communist front group known as the HICCASP, as was President FDR, who was a member of the Screenwriters Guild, which was also a Soviet front group.
So, but don't you think this is some alarmism? Because I would need some real examples to see. Okay, this is a big problem. I mean, if I recall correctly, in the time of Reagan and all that, there was all this talk about the communists, the Reds, and all that. So, don't you think it's sort of a scare? Are these threats actually real? Are these
Yes, they're
these are
very
these threats, are
real.
they observable?
Yes, there was documents that were retrieved from the KGB after the fall of Russia showing that the Soviet Union would pay Hollywood unions millions of dollars a year and had been for 60 years up through the 80s to buy their loyalty.
Mm. And the reason they are doing this specifically with Hollywood is because it's a medium of changing the culture, correct?
Exactly. They want or they really don't care about communism. They don't care about the ideal. They just care about what they can do with communism. I mean, look at Stalin and the oppressions that he's performed. Look at all the political prisoners in the gulags just because they spoke out against him.
That's interesting. So how does cancel culture tie into all of this? How does cancel culture tie in with communism and with Hollywood? We're going to touch on McCarthyism later on, but how does cancel culture tie in with that?
Yep. Okay, where would you like to start with cancel culture? Would you like to start with its origins or what they're actually using it for right now?
Okay, let's start with its origins and then we'll build over to what they're using it for right now.
Okay. Well, the origins of cancel culture, along with the critical race theory, stems from a method for bringing the enemies of the communist governments, as well as their front groups, to heal. They'd even do it to members who got out of line. They'd break them through torture, mental, physical, sexual. And in fact, the Chinese gave it the name struggle sessions. Each person's torture would be tailored to their position within society. For example, a woman in Soviet Russia would be expected to bear children for her husband. So when she'd go through a struggle session, they'd literally rape her until she was pregnant and then send her back to her husband. And for the public official, they'd publicly humiliate them. The laborers were physically tortured. Like this one case out or that occurred during Mao's Great Cultural Revolution. A person's hands were literally tied to where even the slightest, or their arms were bound so tightly that even the slightest motion of a finger on their hand would cause them great physical pain. And during that time that they were being tortured, they would be getting told to confess to a crime. Confess and it'll all stop. Heck, Star Trek The Next Generation gave a perfect example of this with with the episode where Picard was captured by the Cardassians, and during the tortures to try to break him, they were trying to get him to say there were oh god, it's been forever since I've seen the episode. But they were trying to tell him, or trying to get him to say that there was a number of lights when there was a different number of them flashing. This was to try to break his will, break his rebellious streak, you could say. A perfect example that occurred here in America was Albert Maltz. Albert Maltz was a communist who published an article in New Masses magazine, a communist magazine called What Shall We Ask of Writers? He didn't ask the writers to stop with the communist propaganda. Instead, he was trying to tell them to hide it within the narrative, make it seem natural that it would happen, instead of making it seem like an overt push. Like you're seeing nowadays with shows like, for example, Star Trek Discovery, where they've literally made every character hero freaking Mary Sue in their own right. A Mary Sue is a person who's perfect, special, unable to be wrong, and they would do this to the minority characters, the female characters, and they would literally do it because they were trying to build up females and minorities as being perfect, infallible, while trying to say that the white man's always wrong. We also see it with Me Too. Well, a perfect example being Johnny Depp, where a woman will make a false accusation just to build herself up off of bringing down somebody who honestly was not what they said he was not doing what they said he did. Amber Heard abused Johnny Depp, but yet she accused Johnny Depp of domestic violence.
But these examples that you just gave, these examples do not need they do not need how would I say communism to actually manifest. I mean, it could happen anywhere. It's I think it's basic human, just humans being shitty to each other. So if you're using these as
Yeah, but they're using the human
examples
shittiness
of
as a tool.
a deliberate attempt by a
I
okay.
mean, for God's sakes, we saw it with the Kavanaugh hearings where a woman made a false accusation. against him of she accused him of raping her when Kavanaugh had not. Heck, we've seen it too many times. I mean, we even saw it with Mike Tyson.
But the
I
thing
mean,
I noticed about this cancel culture and the way both the right and the left responds to it, I am seeing that I'm seeing sort of a lot of consistency. I mean, the left will go over anyone, even themselves, even those on the left, if they feel such a person has broken their unspoken rules, spoken or unspoken rules. For example, like with the whoopee thing, and like with people like this Harry Potter lady, and some of the left-leaning people, they'll go after them if they think that they've done something that's against their code,
yeah,
and the right
but
will come out
they'll
and
stop
defend.
though.
The right will
Here's
come
the
out and
issue.
defend those people, whether or not they were on the right. So it seems both sides are pretty consistent with their ideologies.
Yeah, but here's the issue though. Or when it comes to, let's say, a Democrat who's stepped out of line, they'll rake him or her for maybe a couple weeks to a month, but they never really cancel him. Look at Patton Oswalt, for example. His literal only sin was posing for a picture with his friend Dave Chappelle. They raked him over the coal until he apologized, and then the moment he let out the apology, they left him alone. But look at Gina Carano, who literally was only saying that when you other a group of people, whether it's for religious, political, or ethnic backgrounds, you're literally taking the first steps towards Nazi Germany and the atrocities that they pulled. She's been, or she got pulled permanently from the Mandalorian, from the Disney universe, and it took the right wing, who's trying to reclaim a spot within the entertainment industry, to bring her back. But yet, Patton Oswald was able to get away with it. I mean, let's look at Whoopi Goldberg. She getting what, 2 weeks for making for speaking out against the Jewish people. But yet, like I pointed out, Gina Carano's permanently banned from anything that's created by the left.
What about Cuomo?
Cuomo, he's somebody that's done fucked up too many times to where it's costing too much to cover him up. He's what they call a useful idiot. A useful idiot is somebody that they'll put into power to do what they want, but they've already got somebody else in line behind him to where once he either does or he either fucks up one too many times or whatever, they can just destroy him.
So you believe he's a pawn? He's just a piece on the chessboard, and he's dispensable or
Yeah, his
expendable.
usefulness ran
How
out.
would you?
His usefulness ran out when he freaking started shoving COVID patients in with all of the freaking elderly in nursing homes, despite the fact that Donald Trump sent a ship that I'd served on during my time in the Navy, the USS Mercy, to New York City to help with COVID.
Okay, so let's get to McCarthyism. What exactly is that philosophy? How does it tie into what we're discussing today?
Well, it was the first time that cancel culture got used in America, and it was not used by the HUAC or Senator McCarthy. It was used by Hollywood against the people who spoke out against them during the hearings. And here's the messed up thing: Joe McCarthy, a senator, had nothing to do with the HUAC hearings. Roy Brewer, a Democrat, was. McCarthy was a senator, which meant he was unable to address the House of Representatives for such a hearing, unless he was to be a witness. McCarthy, however, did hold hearings later on in the late 50s into communist infiltrations into the US government and the military. Hollywood used the news media to dub it McCarthyism because literally, literally they cannot go against Brewer because before Brewer was a freaking Democrat, he was a member of the Union. You seem to be muted.
Yeah, I'm listening to you. I'm listening. Go ahead.
Sorry. But like I was saying, he was smeared in the newspapers because he tried to move against the communists, in which they could not smear the first one, the one who brought two hearings against Hollywood, because he was one of their own, but one that was who was untouchable, someone they could not smear, they could not destroy, they could not rake over the coals.
Under whose administration was this all this going on?
Oh man, let me try to look it up real quick. I can't remember who was president then. I think it was Eisenhower.
So from the little I was able to research or quickly look into on that McCarthyism, what I got was that it actually started as more on the right, you know, sort of a, a right, how will I put it, being obsessed with communists and Russia and making claims that the Soviet Union was going to do this and do all that, but somehow later on it's found its roots, or it's found its base on the left. Is there any truth to that?
No, no, he only held one hearing, and that was after rumors became so widespread that there was no choice but to investigate what was going on in the government. Roy Brewer, he was a member of the Democrats who saw the Democratic Party getting infiltrated with communists and was trying to stop it, and was trying to stop the freaking culture war that was going on at the time. And Roy Brewer was the one who headed up the House Un-American Activities Committee.
But it wasn't about just him. It wasn't about him having a hearing. I think it was more sort of the policies that he was pushing, the policies that he was advocating for, and his person in general.
Are you talking about the Hollywood blacklists? Because
No,
that
I'm
was
talking about
done by
McCarthyism.
McCarthyism is a myth. McCarthy was trying to keep foreign influence from the Soviet Union out of our government and military, in which, considering that we were in a state of Cold War with the Soviet Union, would seem like a pretty good idea. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, it's a pretty good idea, but if you're going to drum up false narratives just to get your message
It
passed
was not
across, just like
false.
maybe with the with the Bush
It was not,
and the Iraq
none of them
War
were
and all that.
false, though. That's the issue. There were legitimately communists, not only in Hollywood, but within the US government itself. Hell, about half of the US unions at the time were Soviet front groups.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay.
I mean, that's the thing. The news media tried to smear not only McCarthy, but the House Un American Activities Committee as a giant witch hunt to try to cover their asses and to try to cover the asses of every communist that was in Hollywood and in and hiding out in unions.
Mm.
Herbert K. Sorrell, he was getting money, or he was the head of. Oh God, let me find it again in the notes real quick. Uh, uh, I can't find the name of the group at the moment. I had it wrote down a little bit ago. Um, okay, here we go. The Conference of Studio Unions, which was basically a group of unions that got together to work together under Herbert K. Sorrell, led a series of violent strikes during the 1930s and 1940s to get all of his fellow communists paid and the money to keep the workers from going in and doing their job was coming from the Soviet Union. In fact, during the HUAC hearings, thanks to communists in Hollywood literally cutting each other's throats, which was the source of the blacklist, they were ratting on a huge Soviet-funded network of front groups and unions, and one of them even revealed a KGB agent that instigated a violent dock workers revolt. But when the newspapers were publishing all of this anti-HUAC articles, they were putting pressure on the government to end the HUAC hearings, along with McCarthy's hearings later on. McCarthy didn't have a problem with homegrown American communist groups. Neither did Ronald Reagan. Both of them have said that they don't care what the beliefs of a political government that is homegrown is, as long as it is created by the will of the people of the United States. What they cared
Okay, now,
about was that the Soviet Union was ceding them money.
okay, now that's an interesting point you just made. If that is true, and they didn't care about homegrown communists, and I remember earlier in this conversation, you were saying that the communists in Hollywood currently are sort of homegrown communists. So
They're not
if
homegrown, they're Soviet funded. They were created by the Soviets.
even till today they're still being funded by the Soviets.
No, today they're funded by China. Why do you think they edited all the movies these past, what, 10, 15, 20 years to fit Chinese tastes? I mean, look at Disney and what they did to John Boyega. reducing his size on the Chinese posters, reducing him from being able to be a Jedi to just another freaking ex-stormtrooper. They made him an ancillary character to Rey, who they turned into a Mary Sue. And do you know
So
why
in
they did
in
that? Because
why?
China does not like black people. You can even see it in several viral videos, like the one I had posted on the server, where they were yelling out N word, N word, N word, go home, N word, at an NBA bus.
But the same can be said of America. In America's history, America doesn't like black people. So why is it?
No,
Why is
it's the
this?
Democrats who don't like black people. They turned the black people into their useless or into their useful idiots. Now, I hate to use this phrase, but it's the most apt one. They did it when they were forced to end Jim Crow. The Democrats were the party of slaveholders. They were the party of the KKK. They were the party of Jim Crow. And they still are. They literally use the black community, who they don't give a fuck about, to generate crises. I mean, look at all of the documented incidents with racist cops. Most of them come from freaking blue states, blue cities, and red states. And that's how they move against the police.
Okay, so why does it seem, if the Democrats are the party of all these terrible things, then how come they're having so much influence with minorities? What are the Republicans doing wrong? Or what are they not doing?
It's the lies and the misdirections. They took over the schools to where they could teach kids freaking racism. I mean, why do you think if you talk to an American white person or an American black person, they've got a story about how growing up they used to be friends with black kids, and then all of a sudden, when the schools would start teaching about things like the Civil War, suddenly the black kids didn't want to be friends with the white kids anymore. They literally culturally drove white people and black people to have enmity against each other to keep us divided. Because they
So are
saw
you
what happened when white people and black people got together in the civil rights era.
so are you saying it's the way it is being taught, or is just teaching it that's the problem? Is it that just teaching the Civil War is driving the wedge,
No,
or the
it's the
way it is being
way it's
taught?
getting taught. Pure and
So
simple.
you have no problems
They tried
with
to,
Civil War being taught.
no, teach the truth, tell the truth. Light is the best disinfectant of all. And I want everything dragged out into the light for everyone to see, all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm the first one to admit that America's got ugliness in its past. And I'm the first one to say that, yes, America still has ugliness in it. I am mixed race. I am mixed Native American and white. Do you know what that amounts to? Nothing.
So you you're saying that you you don't have a problem with them teaching the history, but you have a problem with the way it's being taught. Can you give an example of the way it is being taught that you find problematic?
Well, for one thing, trying to paint it like every white person had a hand in the slave trade, it was only white people ever performing the slave trade. Over in Africa, when one tribe would conquer another one, they'd take the survivors and sell them as slaves. The same things happened throughout history. Throughout history, there's always been a slave trade. The white people were one of the last ones to get in on it. And the US was one of the first nations to get out of it.
But you know that there's a difference between slavery that's existed for millennia and sort of American slavery with the chattel element, where people were more or so bred like cattle to be sold into slavery in perpetuity. That wasn't the case with some slaveries in some other parts of the world.
No, that's always happened. I mean, pure and simple. There were some slaves who literally earned money because they got taught something that it would basically make the owner more money and would basically or basically create more enmity among the slaves that this person's being able to buy their freedom. This person's getting treated better. They've all done it. It's just a form of what that better treatment has been. Why do you think, for example, the Grecian slaves didn't rise up all that often? Why do you think Roman slaves didn't rise up unless the gladiators were rising up?
So now this is what I would say. I would say um, there's no way anyone can hold brief for racism or for hold brief for slavery and say, well, it happened here, so this is it's normal. It's because it happened in other parts of the world. I think it's
Now,
bad
I'm not
across board.
saying that it was normal. I, I'm not saying that's right. What I'm saying is that we were just one group out of many that participated. And we were also one group that stepped away from it faster than most others did. I'm not trying to say that makes it any better that it happened with us. What I'm saying is that it happened like that.
Okay. Now this is my next point would be the way it is being said in America. Don't you think it's because that is America and you are looking at it within the American context? If you're going to go to China, the conversation surrounding slavery would be different from the conversation surrounding slavery in America. If you're going to go to Africa, the conversation surrounding slavery would be different. Don't you think it's because this is a uniquely American experience? That's why people are seeing it within that context and not, just trying to transport other slavery from other parts of the world into the conversation.
I'm saying that literally all slavery was just different faces of the same whole. It was all petty tyrants playing various little petty tyrant games to be able to keep their own. America may have done it a slightly different way, but when you came down to it, it was all about control. So, yes, every country is going to be a little different than another in the way it approached slavery, the way it did slavery. I'm not going to deny that. What I'm saying is that when you get down to the dirt, the nitty gritty, the bare bottom of it, it's all done the same way with just a different face. I mean, look at the Irish. They were literally tricked into slavery. They'd be told over in Ireland, hey, come over here, work for 5 years, 10 years, and uh, you'll be able to get your own land. You'll be able to set yourself up in a new land. You'll get money. You'll get this. You'll get that. And then generations down the line, their children, grandchildren, great grandchildren were getting sold right alongside black people in America.
Okay, so let's get back to. I think you made a quote about Gramsci the other time, if I remember. Is that true?
Oh,
Um,
a quote from who?
Antonio Gramsci.
Uh, I can't remember.
Okay, I think Steve was making an allusion to that one quote that he made on Gramsci, and he wanted us to touch on it. But no problem. We can move on to other parts of the conversation. So um, let's go back to Hollywood. So
Okay.
is there sort of a, how will I put it? Is the culture in Hollywood, is it a product, is it direct product of communist influence, or is it just that American culture is sort of shifting more to the left? That this is just a natural progression of a society.
It's not a natural progression of a society, it's an artificial one. I mean, look at Twitter. For every actual person behind the keyboard, there's at least 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 bots. This is the way the left works. The left will oppress their people, tell them, hey, it's the right's fault, and then send them off after the right.
But don't you think that the left accurately identifies some problem? You know, if if there are issues of discrimination, if there are issues of police brutality, if there are issues, if there's certain issues, don't you think that the left is correctly identifying the problems? Their solutions, it's something is entirely different. It's something on the, it's another matter on its own. But
They
don't you
know the
think?
issues because they created the issues, and then they point at Republicans and say they created the issue, not us. Pure and simple. The Democrats always project anything that a Democrat accuses the Republicans of is something the Democrats have done.
So basically, they are creating problems and preferring solutions. They're manufacturing problems and then turning around to say, "Here, we have the solution to this problem."
Yep, exactly. I mean, pure and simple. Let's look at not only Sandy Hook, but to a lot of the, I'd say probably at least half, if not three-quarters of the school shootings the U.S. has had since the 90s. In the 1990s, they instituted a zero tolerance policy to where somebody who's getting bullied could not stand up for themselves, which emboldened the bullies because the bullies they might get a day or two of detention, but if the person who they're bullying starts freaking swinging on them, they get expelled. This forced the people who were getting bullied to just keep sitting on it and sitting on it and sitting on it because they did not want to destroy their lives because somebody was being an asshole to them until the day that the person who's being an asshole to them pushes too far and they finally snap. I mean, pure and simple. The idea is the spelling whoever throws the first punch was absolute bullshit. Because usually it would be something like a bully would go and slam the people who got bullied into a locker, and they had done it one too many times, picked on them one too many times, and then the person who got bullied would finally have enough and start swinging on them.
Okay, so now let's look at solutions. What solutions would you prefer to the problems that you've identified with Hollywood and with cancel culture?
Oh, God. Unfortunately, it's looking like it's going to have to be a civil war. I mean, it's been too embedded for too
Wow,
long.
that's a that's a massive that's a massive leap. I
Pure
mean,
and simple. If we
how do
want
you
to
go from
root out,
cancel culture, Hollywood culture to civil war?
I mean, pure and simple, they're making it, or they're making plays for our freedoms, they're making plays for our liberty, and literally, they've been doing this since the 1930s. Have you ever heard of The Crucible by Arthur Miller? The story about the witch hunt?
No, no.
He did that to create the false narrative that the HUAC was in and of itself a false witch hunt. The wife of Eli Gazan, a former commie turned informer, was quoted as saying this to Miller about the Crucible. Those witches didn't exist, communists do. Eli Gazan, in a move to counter this false narrative, went on to direct On the Waterfront based on his experiences testifying during the second round of the HUAC. After the hearings, he said, "We must never let the communists stand on the pretense that they stand for something they kill in their own countries." When talking about On the Waterfront, he was quoted as saying, "Every day I worked on that film, I was telling the world where I stood and my critics to go fuck themselves." That's because
But
back then they were trying for this. And nowadays, communism spread out of Hollywood into our academia. I mean, look at every single underfunded public school in the inner cities of the U.S. Do you know why they're underfunded? Because every time the Democrats get into power, they cut the budget. And it's not just our school systems. It's it's not just our public schools either. This goes into college. John Howard Lawson is one example. After he got out as being a communist who was literally forming communist front groups under the cover of talent guilds and cultural clubs, he went on to teach at Stanford University. Everything is aimed today at trying to teach people capitalism is wrong, the right wing is racist, in which the right wing is not. They're Bible thumpers. The right wing extremist is Westboro Baptist Church, as an example. That's a right wing extremist group. The right wing does not go by hatred of skin color. The right wing extreme is literally religious zealots. The left wing's extreme are the racists, the ones that the left uses to manufacture crisis. I mean, look at Charlottesville, for example. You had the people who were there who hated racism that were wanting the statue tore down. Then you had the people who were there saying, look, the reason why we've been keeping it here is to remind ourselves so that we never do this shit again. And then and they were talking, and then in comes in the freaking racist groups, and everybody starts fighting. I
So
mean, mm,
you said that the way you're saying it, it's a civil war thing. Okay, so
yep,
I look at it, when I look at it, I think that's a bit of a stretch, because I think American sort of democracy is much more resilient than you're giving it credit for. And even though people would bicker here and there, it's devolving into sort of a civil war. I just don't see that happening. Maybe it might sneak up on me, but I really don't see that happening.
no,
Even in
it's going
countries
to
that are
happen
much more
because of the cancel culture. The cancel
cancel
culture
culture.
is literally othering another group. It's literally making the making the left wing other the right, and it's causing the right wing to other the left. And when you
So
other
so
somebody, you
so
dehumanize them in the eyes of.
so basically, the aggression is going to come from the right. Is that what you're saying? That the right, they're going to
Nope.
pick up arms because when they get pushed
No,
to
because the right
to the
or the
wall.
right's the truckers that have been up there protesting. The right is the Proud Boys who literally get attacked by Antifa every time they poke their heads out. The right are the people who want to peacefully protest but get attacked. I mean, hell, members of Antifa have already killed Trump supporters. They murdered somebody up in Portland, Oregon, who then conveniently committed suicide in a jail cell.
Okay. So
The left's already spilled
if
blood. It's just a matter of
what's
if they're going to spill enough blood to make the right rise up.
so what other, apart from, say, a civil war breaking out, what other solutions would you prefer? What would you say? Okay, this is what we can do to prevent a civil war happening.
Literally, our only chance to prevent
Sorry.
a civil war is to bring in that red wave in 2022. We've literally
So you
got to
want
take
you
back.
want republic you believe that a Republican presidency is going to prevent
No,
a
not a
civil war.
Republican presidency, because to be honest with you, the presidency is a position that's cucked. It's cuckolded by the Congress, and the Congress is cuckolded by the Supreme Court. That's the way our system works. But we need to get the Congress back. Forget the presidency, because the presidency needs the Congress. Literally, what we've got to do here is get the group that we know is for America, the group that's wanting to bring back businesses to America, the group that's wanting to end cancel culture to power, and have them hold a second and hold another round of HUAC hearings. We need to out all of the foreign influences from our government and from our entertainment, because entertainment is literally downstream from politics.
Hmm. Okay, so we've gone about for 1 hour now. Let me put the link in the description so that I hope you don't mind, so that other people can call in and um, share their views. Maybe push back a little bit on some of the things that you're saying. So the link is going up in the description. Steve, Dr. Mason, Cody, Mr. Pelu, Wolf, Unpopular, any one of you can jump right in, and let's talk about this. Yeah. As for Hollywood, I do know that, like I said at the beginning of this stream, that Hollywood is a big tool of influence, even in other parts of the world. That's how American culture gets transported to other parts of the world. And most of what people know about American culture, at least in my neck of the woods, is what they see from Hollywood. You get. So if Hollywood is getting back into shape the narrative in a particular direction, I think it's a cause for concern, and I think something um, should be done about it. But I don't know exactly what should be done about it or how it should be done. But if there are money pouring in, then probably those funds should be traced, and they should be investigated. Why is this money coming from here, and what is the purpose of this
Yep.
money,
And it's
and
not
all
just
that.
in the federal government either, it's also in the state governments. Part of the reason why California's gone so broke is because of all of the time that the California Democrats have spent pumping Californian money into freaking dark funds for other states' Democrats. I mean, they do it all the time in Arizona. They do it all the time in Nevada. They do it all the time in Oregon. They do it all the time in Washington. They do it all the time in
So why
Colorado.
why does it seem as if the Republicans they're they're tongue tied, or they're held back, or something is why are they not putting up a fight, a good fight?
They have been, or at least the ones who've been for America. You see, the Republican Party has been having its own civil war for a while between
Well,
establishment authoritarian Republicans like the Bushes, in which George H.W. Bush, before he went into politics, he was very big in the CIA. That's the father, the one who held the presidency in the 80s and was VP under Reagan. Yeah, the one whose son went and created the Patriot Act.
Hmm. Okay, so we have Mr. Pelu and we have Steve. So Steve, jump right in.
um, it's hard to it's hard to know where to begin, because on some of these points, I can actually agree with them on some stuff. But the thing that I keep going back to is that while I'm listening to this is there's a lot simpler explanations for what's going on, and I actually agree with you on parts of cancel culture. Stefan Molyneux had a really good point where he said cancel culture is a practice of mass murder without the murder. Cancel culture has existed for forever. Whenever we try to silence voices, that's cancel culture, right? The conservatives have done it for years. Democrats, the leftists have done it for years, and it extends far beyond even the age and expanse of our country. This has not been
Can you
a
show
secret of
me an
society. I'm not
example
done
of?
yet. So it's important to understand that cancel culture itself is bad, and this is where I agree with you, E. It is a horrible travesty of a freedom to speak that helps us figure out these issues. And, the part that I'm concerned about really is that I can see where you're tying all these things together, and I can understand how they seem legitimate and consistent. But from another viewpoint, never attribute malice to that which could be easily explained as stupidity. And it's very possible to apply Occam's razor here, where we could say the simplest explanation tends to be the most true, which is we have designed and built the system that we're looking at, but mislabeling it as communism. But really, this is Americanism gone bad. We've done this. We've forced the pendulum to swing too far because we haven't self-censored ourselves and done the proper research. And if communism really wanted to infiltrate our system, it would not be difficult. Gramsci laid out the entire plan, the slow march through the institutions, through TV programming, cinema, education, politics, every level of a federal government. He stated the best way to take it over is from within, and take your time. And that's why it surprised me that you didn't mention him, because that would be the greatest explanation for your thoughts. But and I'm not trying to be overly critical or rude here. What I'm trying to say is that from an outside perspective, to be honest, some of what you're saying sounds very far-fetched and very hard to follow from the stance of you're making very large leaps of logic.
Sorry to have interrupted you before, but could you give me an example of when the rights tried to censor? I'm not talking about pulling a book off of the curriculum. I'm talking about pulling it out of the library, mind you.
Well, I don't see what the difference is there.
Pulling it off the curriculum, saying, look, we're not making this mandatory, but hey, it's here in the library if you want to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas pulling it from the library is literally pulling it from the library and basically burning it from their ability to read it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, for one thing, it was incredibly difficult to get your hands on any communist literature for a long time. That was solely responsible by the right. Trying to find anything like, Das Kapital was really difficult to get a hold of. The Communist Manifesto was for a long time very difficult to get a hold of. You had to find copies of copies, or you had to get copies from outside of the country because you couldn't find them here readily available and to purchase, because you couldn't purchase them for another reason, which is if you did purchase it, people would be looking at you square. Right. So the problem with McCarthyism is it gave Americans who were invested in intellectual rigor a difficult problem to face, which was, I don't want to be seen as anti-American when I want to know how to argue this the best possible way. I've purchased Das Kapital. I've purchased the Communist Manifesto, and each one of those times those same thoughts ran through my head. But thank God McCarthyism failed in its effort to remove these items from the American eyesight.
Actually,
if you'd like, I can search really quickly for any examples of where the right has censored books. Absolutely. But I don't think it's far-fetched to believe that they already have. And Mouse is a really good example of that, because I want you to understand this. When did they do that? When was the day that they announced that Tennessee school district? When did they announce that? If you're not aware, it was the exact day of the liberation of Auschwitz. That's not a fucking coincidence. So when people tell me that the right doesn't,
did you read the contact that they had sent out within not only Tennessee but other school districts around the country, saying, look, we caught this student jerking off to Mouse. Is there anything that we can show them without nudity?
Okay, so here's where I have a problem with that. Attributing one aberration to an entire structure is a fallacious effort, and this is where they made their mistake. Like one kid doing that to one book, or even if it was 10 kids to one book, does not mean the entire country is at risk of being negatively influenced by the graphic nature of any book, right? It's like saying all children are incapable of controlling themselves. Now the book should remain in the place that it was before. I find it strangely curious that only now do they have a problem with it.
No, they literally caught some students stroking off the mouse, and they literally said, "Hey, look, instead of having this be on the mandatory list, we want to put it on the if you want to read list, because that would limit to the perverts who might just go and hit the internet."
Well, that's going to happen regardless.
Whereas
there's always been access to
that
pornography,
it was
though.
shoving them into the faces of the kids. It was
Right,
basically in their eyes,
Is the book
handing a
is
kid
the
a
book a
Playboy and
pornographic
saying, "Here you
book?
go, don't jack off to it."
Yeah, but the book is not inherently pornographic.
The-
It's a story.
Yes, I agree with you, and so did they. That's why they left it in the libraries, but pulled it from the mandatory read and said, "Hey, can you guys suggest something else, something that doesn't have nudity or sex?" Just
Right,
like
so
in my school district growing up, our AP class literally got caught with assignments in it, which these were from a college course, mind you, about stuff like writing a graphic sex story that your parents wouldn't want, or that you wouldn't want your parents to read.
right. So if I can, let me example this, and I can example this very well that I think you and I can both agree on. Is, back in the 80s, National Geographic used to show very, very explicit pictures of Aboriginal women, and there was a joke running around. It was called National Pornographic, right?
Yeah.
But here's the reason why we should have an issue with removing that kind of a content from an educational environment, is that the intent of the book being produced and being promoted is not the problem. The problem comes when we apply some kind of morality structure against an educational book and then apply a discriminatory process such as removing it from a curriculum. What you're doing is nothing short, in that case, of what we complain the left doing so frequently, where they mislabel the entire issue. The issue is not the content in the book. The issue is the behavior of the people using the book.
Yeah,
because if we go down this route, I should be incredibly critical of every single Christian out there and for everything that's ever been done in the name of Christianity, and I'm not going to do that.
Literally, they said, "Give us something better, something that does not have sex but still has the same message."
That's the wrong point, is what I'm saying. The point is not what's in the book and how people look at it.
Saying, "Here's some porn, you have to read it," or "You have to read this book, and there's some porn on this page." They're literally saying they wanted a Virgin Mouse without porn on the page.
But it's not fucking porn.
Even pixelate it. Even pixelate the nudity.
But the point is it's not porn. Seeing naked people.
It's that freaking 13-year-olds are making it porn for themselves.
Okay, so that's the point that I'm trying to get across. When I look at pictures of Auschwitz and I see naked women and children, I'm not turned on by that, because it's not the intent of the education. The intent of the education is to show us the brutality, the nastiness, the grossness, the horrible environments that these people had to live in. If someone wants to take that as a source of pornography, they are the problem, not the fucking material. And I'm not going to budge on that.
They're literally saying, let's take the pornography out of it. We want to keep the message. We just want the pornography out of it.
I'm not going to do it.
And
I would never support that.
They're not even saying pull the pictures of the dead bodies. They're talking about literally in mouse. They're seeing
Mr. Pilu jump in at this point.
No, yeah, thanks for letting me jump in. I mean, I don't have too much to say. I just wanted to come on and give my support. But on the topic right now, I kind of get what he's saying because if you have a program and something like that, I mean, if you just want to take it for children, like some things could be age appropriate. You know what I'm saying? You can make an adult version and a non-adult version. Like if society says they do not want their kids seeing a certain material, I don't think it's that bad to say kids should not see this material right now. Maybe we should make it for older ages. Some things are for mature audiences. So I kind of understand if you're trying to make it for mature audiences, given that the child's school curriculum is for kids 13 years old. That might, if you might not think it's appropriate for 13-year-olds to see this material, it doesn't stop it from being educational material, good material. But you might want to make a version that society says is okay for this grade level. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
So
Yeah, they'd
I'd like
even
to
ask
echo.
for
All right,
that
thank you.
first.
What do we do about museums? Should we put dresses on all the statues because some kid's going to take it the wrong way? No, what we're doing is we're hiding the human body, and the human body is not something to be disgusted by. It's something to be admired. It's something to be beautiful, right? And by looking at the human body as if it's some nasty, dirty thing, I got a fucking problem with that because it's not. It's a beautiful thing, male, female, whatever. It's a beautiful construct of what nature has built from 400,000 years of evolution. And I want to look at a beautiful body, and I want my children to look at a beautiful body. I've got a nude impressionist piece in my living room that was hand painted by an artist in Seattle. And it hangs proudly in my house. And when my son looked at it and finally discovered what it was, I told him it's because human bodies are not something to be objectified. They're not something to be sexualized. They are beautiful in their own creation. So when we
We have,
take these things into account, right, when we look at the educational value of the human body in art, literature, sculpture, um, we can't hide that. We cannot hide that. And so if some kid somewhere is taking it the wrong way, that's an issue in a family. Their family failed to educate them on what that should mean. This is not the book's problem. It's not the school district's problem. It's a fundamental problem at the fundamental base of the feet of the parents.
yeah, okay. I'm speaking of that, yeah, I hear my same museum stuff, but at the same time, a schoolhouse not necessarily a museum all the time. A schoolhouse is a special place for kids to come learn, right? So if people say, okay, this is not what we want in the schoolhouse or in the mandatory school curriculum because we think it's not necessarily age appropriate, I still don't. I mean, you might say you like that's your view of the human body, and I have no problem with the human body neither. But at the same time, I still believe that there's some levels of decency and appropriateness, right? And of course, it's a negotiation in society. You know what I'm saying? And everybody has the right to negotiate for their position of what the decency is. But I think society does have the ability to say something is indecent or not, and the level of decency, and of course, the negotiation. But so if that's what they've decided in that particular jurisdiction, that it might be too much. I mean, you don't have to agree with it or not, but I don't think it's invalid to either have that opinion or to have a position where we want to maintain a certain level of protection or discretion or a certain level of covering for the children because we want, like exactly you said, we want the families to decide how they're going to tell the children about the human body, and we don't want to make this, we want to take it outside of the school realm, this particular thing, because we know the sensitivity of children underage. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
All
I
right.
mean, pure and
No,
simple.
There's a better way to do
A
it than that.
kid starts developing their sexuality at age 13. And the parents who called for it after this had happened were literally calling on it as a way of saying, hey, look, kids this age are not mature enough for this. If you want to edit it down, if you even want to pixelate it, we will keep it in the school. And the school system had said this as well. If you can get us a pixelated version, we'll keep it. But pure
It's
and simple,
censorship.
the
It's
parents
censorship.
Look,
However you want to
a
cut that is
kid
Yeah,
fucking
when they're
censorship.
yeah,
13
No,
is
no,
starting
no.
to develop. The
But
parents want them to develop on their own. They don't want, for example, a kid to be able to hop onto the internet and pull up a woman getting gangbanged. They don't want their kids to go to school and have anything sexual taught to them at the age of 13 when they're still young and too immature to perform the act, but their bodies are physically mature enough to suffer the consequences of the act.
Right, but we're
yeah,
displacing
Anything
the
yeah,
about
right.
sex beyond, hey, look, you're starting to develop, this is what's going to happen to you.
yeah. I
And
want
We're
then
to add real
displacing the
quick.
that's why there's
responsibility of the
high
parent over
school
the
sex
over
ed
the
and
school.
there's middle school sex ed.
Yeah, yeah. It's like this. It's like this, right? I mean, yeah, it's censorship. I totally agree that is censorship. But I think some censorship is actually good. Like, okay, what? Why do we have ratings on movies? Right? That's a censorship. Society is decided that, oh, we need to have ratings on movies, and kids under a certain age cannot come without their parent or guardian to this movie because we decided that as a society that it's that we know as a group that it's too much. Now, of course, it's not unanimous, but the powers that we have decided that this is too much for society. So society has censorship for children to stop from so they'll be introduced to things within a certain manner because some people want to control how the children introduce certain things. In society has agreed that parents have that prerogative for the most part. Not everybody, for the most part, they've agreed to that. That's why we have things like censorship and child laws and things like that. So yes, it's censorship, but I think certain amount of censorship is totally reasonable and decent even in a free society. Thank you.
Well, you're hitting the nail on the head there, Palo, and let me explain why. Like you're fundamentally you are very conservative, and I appreciate that. The perspective is not to force conservatives to do something. There's many other ways that we could handle this in much more democratic ways, right? So we can say we're going to have the students read this book. You must sign this waiver. Inside this book, there are images, graphic images of nudity and yada, 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 yada. Fine, make a list. But it's a parent's responsibility to talk to their children about these, not the fucking schools. And
And
that's
how's
the
the
point that
parent
I'm
going
trying
to
to make
do that when
across.
they're
Because
working
if you're
12,
not,
14 hours a day?
you're doing the exact same thing that we're bitching about the left doing. It's the
Now, here's a
same
question
thing.
for you.
well, okay.
How is a parent or
Can I
both
just
parents working anywhere between 12 to 14 hours a day going to be able to talk, or where are they going to have time to talk to their kids about this?
It's 4 hours.
And if a kid,
I work
okay?
10 hours a
Let me
day.
just get this. Let me get this in. I think Steve is going to say Charles is fundamentally conservative after saying this, but I'm seeing Mr. Pelu's point. I am very much a libertarian, and I am all for people doing whatever the hell they want. But for kids, and I think you and I agree on this, but for kids, there's a certain level of protection that should be brought into it. You understand? Because they're just not mature enough to be able to handle certain things. There's no amount of talking that at times you're going to talk to a kid about certain things that once they get to school among their peers, they're easily influenced to doing certain things, and things of the sexual nature have their own peculiar things that come with it. You understand? So I don't think it's out of place. I don't think it's draconian for parents to be concerned about something that may negatively influence their 13-year-old child. You understand? And then say, okay, you know what? Maybe we should not be showing this to kids this age. Once you're 18 and above, well, do whatever the hell you want. You can. That's You're an adult now. You should be able to live with the consequences of your actions. But for kids and children, yeah, some censorship is needed. And like the example Mr. Pelu gave, if movies are rated, there's a reason why movies are rated, so that kids don't watch certain sensitive things. So if we're going to say on the basis of that, then we shouldn't have ratings for movies. If we're going to just to invoke and say, well, that's censorship isn't good. I believe that we all understand that there are nuances to everything, and there are places where we make trade-offs to make accommodation for certain things, that no rule is very hard and fast, nothing is cast on stone, and we're going to look at it on a case by case basis to get out the best. Like I think Thomas Sowell will say something. He said there are no solutions, only trade-offs. So you are not going to find a perfect solution that suits everybody, suits every situation, but you are going to get something that approximates to the best outcome that you're looking for. You understand? So in this case, this might not be a solution, it might just be the trade-off that is necessary at this point. So I'll let Cody speak at this point. Cody, join the conversation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
All right then. I wanted to wait until the conversation was over about school curriculum and MAUs because I haven't read too much into the details of the issue, so I couldn't speak on specifics. But I do have my own mixed feelings, and that one, I can understand how some people could think that certain children aren't mature enough to handle certain subjects. But I also don't think that it's right to ban certain materials from being educated to children in general, especially in regards to sex and sexuality. I also have my own concerns about what right a parent has to control what their child is educated on, because I was raised by a very conservative family that refused to educate me about sex and sexuality. Beyond the point in which I should have been taught about it, and that caused me a lot of psychological harm. And I'm glad that my public school gave me some education about sex and sexuality, because they gave me more than my parents did, even though it was an abstinence only education program. So I think the children should be educated more on sex and sexuality for the sake of their own mental health, because I think that would have educated or helped me better. But that gets more off the subject of cancel culture and whatnot, which was the point of this stream, and I don't want to do that anymore. So I was hoping that we could try to return to that subject as well, because I think we need to talk about exactly what we mean by cancel culture as well, because I think that's become a very catch-all term meant to encompass a lot of different things. The one that I care about mostly is online harassment campaigns, which I think is the worst aspect of what people associate with cancel culture, because it drastically affects people's mental health.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful summary by Cody. So okay, so let's recenter the conversation back to cancel culture. Who wants to go? So that's the points that Cody brought up on cancel culture. E, do you want to go?
Okay, yeah. I mean, pure and simple. I'll agree that there's a lot of bad things that come with with cancel culture. It's part of the reason why they're using it as a torture against the people who won't freaking join up with their or with them. Pure and simple. They're literally trying to demoralize us. Yuri Bezmenov warned of it.
Who's the they and who's the us, you mean?
The communists. The
And
higher
who's the us, you
communists.
mean?
Us being literally everyone who's not a communist, who does not agree with the communists.
Okay, so a very us versus them statement. Okay.
Well, I mean, pure and simple, when you've got a majority that wants things one way and you've got a minority that wants them another, and the minority's trying to literally force the majority to accept what they want instead of trying to come to a compromise, it becomes very us versus them.
Okay, I'm not sure what minority or majority you're talking about, because I've never met
The
an
minority,
individual.
again, being communist, and majority being everyone who is not communist.
Oh, okay, okay.
Because, I mean, not counting 2020 because of the fact that there's been audits, there's been allegations, and there has been video that's come up, none of which anybody's been willing to talk about. So, or talk about in court, so there's no point in bringing them up. Let's look back at 2016. Trump won because he got the country. He did not go for the city folks because he knew that the city folks had been attacked by communism. What do you think weaponization of welfare and the freaking divorce slash family courts has been? It's been an attempt to demoralize men. Same with Me Too. I mean, don't get me wrong, when a person legitimately does something, they need to go the fuck down for it. But they need to be proven before a freaking court of their peers without a shadow of a doubt that they did it.
You're
Before
jumping around.
something
I'm
like
lost in what you mean. You were talking about Trump winning over the country, then you were talking about weaponization of welfare, and now you're talking about people going to jail seemingly unfairly. So I'm lost on the point you're trying to make because you're jumping between subjects a lot.
one literary saying is this: there's a lot that's going on. And unfortunately, the freaking communist bomb that got planted by the Soviet Union back in the 1930s is literally freaking blowing up around us. They're manufacturing crises. I mean, why do you think back in the 90s Joe Biden went and freaking turned the police into a freaking floating joke as far as training goes? I mean, pure and simple, back in the 90s with the 1994 crime bill, Joe Biden had the chance to turn our police into one of the best in the world, corruption free, no longer relying on tickets that were done up to screw people over, excellent pay, excellent training, make them uncorruptible. But instead, he goes and has the cops getting put out after 6 freaking weeks out onto the streets by themselves.
Okay, I don't understand the thread you're
Right.
trying to connect between communism in the 1930s and the 1994 crime bill, but let's see. I know I
Let
was
me finish up.
okay.
As things continued to progress from the 90s, not only did they nerf the police, make them far worse off than before, but they also removed the Pell Grants, which were used to try to teach a prisoner a trade, a skill, something to where they didn't have to go back out onto the streets and rob another liquor store or sell another bit of drugs or what have you that got them into there in the first place. Instead, they were coming out no better off than they were before. Actually, made worse because of the fact that they now had a strike on their rap sheet. Their social credit got screwed up to where they can't even get a job. This was the same thing that the Soviets would do, not only to political prisoners, but to create useful idiots. Useful idiots that got deployed after George Floyd, in which George Floyd was a tragedy and it was police brutality, that I agree. However, I do not agree that defunding an already freaking cut to hell police force was the issue, or was the answer. The answer was putting more money into training them to be better, training them to not, for example, put a knee on a neck, training them how to properly and painlessly restrain somebody who's attacking you without a gun, to where you don't have to freaking taser them, to where, you know, they're literally safe, unharmed, and ready to face court, trial, whatever. But they're safe. Instead, now you've got cops that haven't been out since God knows when, going out there along with people who literally are coming straight out of the police academy. I mean, pure and simple. Democrats create crises so they can virtue signal and so they can fix them.
Well, the problem that I have with that is the 1994 crime bill proposed by the Clintons was largely bipartisan supported, with a majority of 58% of non-white Americans supporting the bill. So both Republicans and Democrats both supported the bill. So 49% of white Americans, racialized white Americans, supported the bill. Well, it matters because it was not a communist effort to castrate the United States. This was a response to drastic crime sweeping across the country, massively high crime rates across the country everywhere.
Yeah, I'm also a little lost on what distinctions may be trying to be made between communism and socialism, especially in regards to E's comment about Pell Grants, because I've heard many conservative-minded individuals speak against prisoners being educated in prison because they accuse them of being rewarded for bad behavior by being given a free education, and some have framed that as socialism. So I'm not sure if he's trying to make a distinction here.
Oh, yes, I'm very much trying to make a distinction.
E, do you want to respond
This
to that?
is the way you kick off a cultural revolution. It's what they did in China. Hell, it's what the freaking Nazis did in Germany.
They did what?
So actually, I'm confused at that. So there are commonalities in how Nazis and communists approach cultural revolutions.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
look at Antifa and look at the brown shirts, for example.
Well, I would compare the Proud Boys more to the brown shirts, honestly, but go ahead.
Well, to give E some credit here, he's not entirely wrong on that. Hannah Arendt, in her book Totalitarianism, actually discussed how similar both Nazism and communism functioned as a means to get the populace behind the majority support.
Well,
so
those
not
are
uncommon. They work
basically
both very similar.
extremists. I mean, the
they're
extremes
extremists.
tend to be similar.
Well, the problem
Yes,
people
let me
make
jump
is they view it from like a straight line between fascism and communism, and it's not. It's a circle.
Well, no,
if you go
that's what
further
I'm
enough
saying.
around, you come back to the other one.
Exactly. But I mean,
Yeah.
even if you take something like, if there's such a thing as rational, Nazis or rational communists, they're not necessarily the same. There's a lot of confusion here, and it's not my job to fix it, but there's some points here that are rather interesting. I'll just leave it at that.
Now, I'm going to say this. The Proud Boys were not brown shirts. The Proud Boys were freaking militiamen, if anything.
And militiamen certainly can't be extreme, correct?
No, I'm not saying they aren't extremists. I'm saying you're going for the wrong wing with that.
Well, I'm going for the extremist wing.
Yeah, I don't agree, because there was plenty of Proud Boys who were wearing shirts that said 6 million wasn't enough.
The right-wing extremism aims more towards that militia group that was affiliated with Westboro Baptist. They're Bible thumpers.
Okay,
yeah, but you even said they were extreme, right?
Oh yeah, I'm agreeing they're extreme, but I'm saying
okay. Well, my point is extreme in any extremists of any sort are too much. Once you become extreme, I really don't care what your base ideology is. You're extreme.
I agree 100%. But what I'm trying to say is this: it was something that I had to point out, because there is left-wing and right-wing extremism. I'm not saying there's not. In fact, hell, I will denounce any extremist group, right or left-wing, right now.
Good.
What I'm saying is this, though. If you're going to say one group is more like the other, You got to go for the same wing
I'm
because
saying you
it's a
said
different
they're alike.
ideology that drives them.
You said they're alike. You used the word extreme. They are alike in being extreme, correct? That's the commonality I'm going for.
Yeah, but you've got to go for a more nuanced commonality.
Okay, so I have to go for nuanced extremism.
No, I'm saying you've got to go for a nuanced commonality when comparing extremism because that's how you get people saying, for example, Nazis were right wing, in which they weren't. They were left wing. They were National Socialist.
Okay, well, so basically what you're saying is I should look for nuance in extremism because some extremists are better than other extremists.
So I'm saying that the way you
No, I
defeat
think
them is revealed in knowing what wing's extremism you're going towards.
I think
Like, for
all
example,
extremists are bad. How about that blanket
yes, they're
statement?
all bad, but there's different ways to beat them based off of which wing they are.
It also depends on how you're defining wings, because
Well,
like left and right are very oversimplified directional metaphors when talking about politics.
right. You know, the thing that that pops out to me here is when the othering. I'd like to go back to that because that's an important topic of conversation when we're talking about ideologies, right? So when we see an ideology, especially a political ideology, going the direction of the othering, right? The silencing of the othering, the others, the type of behavior where it's name calling, it's ad hominem attacks, it's don't question this, don't look up, so to speak, right? I have yet to see a circumstance where extreme right wing political ideology at its most militant, so militant, extreme militant rightism and extreme militant leftism, both function identically. Like when you look at it with a critical eye, they both function identically. And so the rest of us here in the middle are just like, what are these fucking idiots doing? Like they don't expect us to really actually fall for this bullshit, right? But apparently there is a large majority of the country that actually does. But what I find most valuable in this topic of conversation really is when you look at communism, and it's something that I happen to read a lot on. Communism itself has always been ideologically flawed from the very beginning. But fascism was something that was born out of a strange necessity for these countries to try and gain power. There's no book on how to take over a country with fascism. But the strange thing is they both function the same, where they appeal to society to make that differentiation. They both synthetically create problems that will get one group of people, or hopefully all group of people, much like they did in Germany, to act against another group of people within the same country. So the problem isn't yeah, the problem is not
that's the playbook.
Right. The problem is not communism. The problem is looking at ideologies, regardless of where they stand on the political circle, and pointing out where these things go wrong, the characteristics of these behaviors, and the assumable outcome. Because we've got enough history behind us. We know where communism goes wrong. We know where fascism goes wrong. We know the characteristics of each one of these groups. But I haven't seen much difference between extreme militant leftists and extreme militant rightists when I'm looking on Twitter. I've seen the same disgusting, revolting behavior out of both of these parties. So, in my opinion, I want to.
The difference is in how you defeat it.
Hold on, let's finish.
They've each got a separate ideology.
No, the way to defeat it is rather easy.
Is that the Bible is, or whatever version, or whatever religion's version of the Bible is the one and only way.
Okay.
The easiest way to dismantle these and to fight against them is to say no.
A person who is literally a religious extremist through politics. You defeat them through religion.
Steve,
just like you do not take a political extremist and try to deprogram their extremism through church.
Steve said it best. The problem is the othering. Both sides do it. Extremists do it better. There always has to be a foil or an enemy or something. It doesn't matter whether you're communist or uh, Nazi. There always has to be an other.
Yeah,
But
and I would like to.
okay, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Charles, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to try to bring things back around a bit. And first, I'd like to say, Steve, try to stay off of Twitter. That's what I do because nothing but bullshit on there from far as I can tell.
I use it primarily for promotion. That's what I
Okay,
primarily use it
I
for.
stay off of there because I don't think it's a format that's actually built for well thought out conversations. But
It's not.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not.
But I understand that there is a connection between, socialism and fascism. I knew that since grade school when I knew that both were influenced by Marxism, and the fact that Mussolini, who was the first to create a fascist country, was raised as a socialist and used a lot of his socialist thinking to create fascism. The main distinction that I form is that fascism is a form of collectivism that focuses mostly on cultural collectivism, whereas communism focuses mostly on material collectivism. So I think that comes back to the idea of cancel culture, and that fascism, again, is more about cultural collectivism. And I think that cancel culture is kind of tied a lot into cultural identity and cultural norms. And it relies a lot on, what I've read about being the norms of shame, guilt, and honor cultures. And I think that what we see in what people call cancel culture, which again is a catch all term, is people using the norms of shame culture to influence people's behavior patterns. And I've seen this growing up in conservative society. I saw what happened to the Dixie Chicks, or the Chicks now, when they called out George W. Bush, and see a lot of other things throughout history. So I think that the main issue is that a lot of people who may consider themselves more liberal or left wing are using the cultural norms of those who are considered right wing or conservative to influence social reform, which is shame, the feeling of shame. And I think that is a very destructive emotion. And I think that it is a bad play in order to try to weaponize shame as a means of creating cultural reform.
Right. I wholeheartedly agree with you on that.
Okay,
And
there's one point I wanted to make is maybe we're just glossing over what he is trying to say with understanding the differences in the extremism in order to be able to solve it properly. We always sort of knock candy up on the head and say you're mislabeling things. That if you mislabel things, you may not be able to get the proper solution. So from what I understood from what he's saying, is that definitely he doesn't agree with any form of extremism, any form of extremist ideology, whether on the right, whether on the left. But we have to be able to know that this is the way in which right extremism presents itself. These are its features. Even though at the end of the day, violence is still the ultimate goal of both right and left extremism. But up until the point of violence, what are those telltale signs? And how can we fix it so that it doesn't get to the point of violence? So I think that's where he's getting at, not that saying that we have to be nuanced about what type of extremism. No, extremism is extremism, but what leads up to the violence part is certainly
can I
different from the right angle and also different from the left angle. Go ahead,
can I
Stanley.
go can I go back to my point?
Yeah,
Um, you don't become extreme. You don't recruit people into, kind of an extreme viewpoint without creating an enemy. The commonality is othering. Othering is the root problem at both extremes.
Yeah. I need to apologize because I wasn't clear on my motives by coming in here. My motives coming in here wasn't to bash you, E. It was not to do that. Because I actually agree with your overall message, which is we need to be watching this shit and not let it happen again. We've got enough history behind us. We know what the end result of these bad policies and these bad ideas are going to be. You won't find an argument with me on that. What I'm asking you to do is clear it up a little bit more and to remain logically consistent, because you're jumping around a lot using arguments that really shouldn't be attached to each other. And from my perspective, because I read on a lot of these topics. I'm concerned about the same things that you're concerned about. But
Well,
some things should not be attributed to malice, that should be contributed to stupidity.
understood.
If you go back to the welfare issue, right? I don't believe that Democrats weaponized welfare to intentionally harm minorities. I just don't. It did, however, have an iatrogenic effect on them. I don't think that's anything that we can deny. And anybody who's curious about what iatrogenic means, it's a medical term where you go in to the hospital for a minor cut, right? You get a couple stitches, but you leave with a staph infection that is incurable, right? So you go in, you try to do something good, but end up causing more harm coming out. So I just don't want to mislabel issues and say, well, this is communism, whatever, or this is intentional harm. I don't want to do that, because I have a deep found belief that human beings, even politicians, don't go around trying to actively commit harm on the populace. And I think that itself is another form of othering. And that's why I'm calling you out on it. And I hope I'm calling you in on it, excuse me. And so I hope you understand that I don't hold any malice against you, and I don't hold any malice against your ideas. I just think they need to be tightened up and a little bit more logically consistent.
I want to piggyback on that point. I agree, but the thing is I think we can all agree, that the social safety net has some major flaws.
Fuck
My
yeah.
problem is that if we know their flaws, it doesn't matter, which side of the aisle you're on. My biggest thing is, why the hell haven't we fixed it if we know what the problems are? I see a whole lot of, the Democrats,
that is unfixed.
the Democrats caused the problem. Well, that's great. We can assign blame where we want to. My thing is, why, as Americans who are supposedly exceptional, why have we not taken major steps to fix it?
Yeah, yeah, but I want to step in to talk to back E real quick. That's his point though. He said it repeatedly. The reason is you would have to identify where it's coming from. You can't. Not everything has the same solution. You might say it all sounds the same, but if there's two different solutions to two different problems, we need to figure out, delineate what the problems are and find a solution. Things might look alike, but it might have two different roots and two different causes. And if it takes two different solutions to do it, we have to know two different
Awesome.
solutions. We can't just have one solution for everything if
I,
it doesn't work.
I absolutely support that.
Yeah, that's what he was trying to say. I'm not saying that you might agree with his conclusions, but that was his agenda in talking, and he made it clear that was his agenda.
My concern is that we
no,
become
I'm
what
less
we are
clear.
fighting against.
I heard a whole lot of othering of Democrats, quite frankly.
That happens a lot. My concern is that
if I wasn't
by
saying
making these efforts,
bring into the progressives, I wouldn't be saying, look at what the Democrats are doing.
my point is that we have to be very careful when doing what you're suggesting. We have to be very, very careful that we do not become that which we are trying to fight against.
Hey, I agree completely, but like I'm saying,
okay,
we
cool.
need to do a deep dig into the government. I mean, we the people, not we, whoever we vote into office.
Sure.
I'm
we can make
we
that
need
argument.
to go
Absolutely.
in with the same rights as anyone else, innocent until proven guilty, quick trial, do 100,000% due diligence on everything. Look into, for example, why Hillary's phones were smashed, why her server was bleach bitted. Look into everything, especially with the current allegations going on that Hillary's campaign had spied on Trump during his presidency and during his campaign in 2016. I'm saying that needs to be investigated. We need to go and investigate everything 100% properly, 100% by the books. And those who are guilty of that need to be punished. Those who are innocent of it, you are innocent. How are you supposed to know what was going on?
Now, if you were to ask my opinion, E, I think that's a great idea, and I completely agree with you. You'll find no disagreement with me. But at a more fundamental level, what that takes is information, right? We have to have the information to do that. If you want to change that, we have a serious fucking problem. Excuse me. We have a serious problem with our media systems. We have a serious problem with our media outlets, because everybody on this planet knows that we can't trust the media systems, especially legacy media within the United States, because and I've talked about this before. Back in 1968, the trust in the media, in the U.S. media, was at an all-time high of, I think it was like 72 to 78% in 1968. Last year, it was an all-time low at just over 36%. Why? It's because we know that they're not telling us the damn truth. So if there's one thing that we should change before we change anything else, is the way that we can collect and disseminate truthful, full information, not sides, not parts, not narratives. No, I want to know everything. And I think every American deserves to know everything so they can make a decision. So before we even go on that venture, before we even go on that journey to so to speak, reconstruct our republic, we should start with information dissemination and collection. Personally, that's my opinion.
I agree. This is where we need to, or I agree completely. The news media is the first one I want called up to those stands. I want to find out why they've been false media for so long, what they did to become false media, and how we can prevent it from ever happening again.
Well, I don't think it's false media. I think it's narrative media.
Yeah, same thing.
There's a little bit of truth in everything. Well, there's a little bit of truth in everything.
Well, but if the information you're having, you're spinning it to give a different impression, that's falsehood, because you are not representing.
It's a lie by omission, sure.
Yep.
That doesn't mean the information is actually correct.
Veritas's American Pravda. They talked about it. They talked about how CNN edits footage for their narrative.
Well, CNN's embarrassed themselves quite well over the last 6 months.
6 months. They've been doing this crap since the 90s.
Sure, but I'm just going to take the last 6 months because it's the most evident.
Rodney King came out in a Democrat city.
Well, I don't care about Rodney King at the moment. We're not even talking about Rodney King.
Why do you think he got out? That it happened in a Democrat.
Well, I'm referencing the last 6 months because majoritively because of the Joe Rogan controversy, and numerous Joe Rogan controversies actually. But also they've been caught with their pants down several times recently within the last 6 months that has absolutely destroyed their credibility. So that's why I refer to the last 6 months. Of course, it's been going on since at least arguably the 80s. But that's not the point. The point is to agree that it's been bad the last 6 months.
Further back.
Yeah, but
I can go back to the HUAC hearings when they attributed HUAC, which was the House Un-American Activities Commission. Remind you, House of Representatives, and they pinned it to Joe McCarthy, a senator who can only address the House back then when he's literally called up as a witness.
Well, that's because he instituted McCarthyism in the 1920s and 30s.
Brewer.
So let's get Cody on the unpopular in.
And I've also got more stuff on that if you'd be interested.
Yeah, see, I'm a bit confused because I know CNN was founded in 1980, so I'm not sure what they had to do with HUAC. I did want to ask E a little bit, about what the foundations of his beliefs are, though, like where he's coming from. E, I understand, right? You live in Kentucky?
Ohio.
Ohio? Oh, okay then. See, I live in Michigan, so you're a little bit of the south of me. And I remember you said before that you're of Native American descent. What band or nation are you a citizen of?
Blackfoot.
Blackfoot. Okay, then.
Yeah,
so I was wondering.
I'm Montauk. I don't know if that matters much.
Okay. See, since I understand that you lived up near the East Coast, I wasn't sure if you relate to any East Coast tribes. So I was wondering, I'm not sure about the policies the Blackfoot Nation have, but I know that a lot of Native American nations do have a lot of policies about communal living and responsibility, and that a lot of people call that socialist. I was wondering what distinctions you would make.
No, that's collectivism. The difference comes in the leadership and what they're doing. I mean, let's look at the difference between communism and National Socialist. They were both fundamentally the same. The difference was in the policies. And I will say this, communalism is actually, in my belief, the way we should be living. We should not be shoved into these huge, massive cities. We should be in smaller communities with hubs that would make it not only easier to maintain our infrastructure, but it would also make it easier to implement new infrastructure compared to like New York City or LA.
Okay, so
All
you
right,
are okay
unpopular.
with some degree of collectivism. So I wanted to know if you made a distinction between that and generalizing communism and socialism in general. So I'd like to learn more about the nuances later, but I just interrupted Charles. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think he addressed that question now. So unpopular, jump in.
Well, hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I guess what I wanted to say is, um, it's just the way that we are divided amongst like our walks of life. That's like the main thing that interests me because you are divided by education, we're divided by communities, or we're divided by race, backgrounds, and all these things, and that's on a small scale, like just like how we come together as people in this country. We're so divided just by our upbringings. And when it comes to us trying to do things like when it comes to individualism, which that's something I've been paying attention to very closely. um Comparing this to collectivism is just like you have to get, I don't know, you have to put in the work individually to first see if you can get to a point where you can form a collective or you could network with people, because the over here in the states, the way that I let's see, the way that our systems is set up, we have you know identification systems, DMV set up to identify us and all this stuff. We have these birth certificates. We have this intricate way of just saying who you are in America. I mean, you could wake up tomorrow, and if you have shit, it's pretty cheap. You could wake up tomorrow and go change your name to Rainbow Dan if you wanted to. So it's just like, it's simple things like that, like just like your identity and shit, like in this country, it really matters. So it's just um like Steve was saying about wanting to know all the information, and it's just like, um you have people in this country, I feel like, um when you look at the conservative narrative, it's just like people are trying to conserve that, the value of information, because it kind of takes away from people who went out there and actually worked hard to get an education. Like, think about somebody that has a degree in psychology, or a degree in engineering, or a degree in political science, or a degree in a degree in medicine, or they have a skill or a trade. It takes away from, this new information era takes away from people who actually go out there and get a real education. It takes away from the productive value of Americans. And I feel like there's a lot of Americans that, they live in that retrospective of, man, I worked hard for the shit that I have. So I'm not finna just and I'm pretty sure that they're very accepting of other people that like, you can go on the internet right now and learn anything for free. For free. And it's just like, comparing that to somebody that actually went out there and got, uh how do I say it, a cemented education, something that was implemented into the system where it's, I don't know, I don't know exactly how to define it, but it's liable, it's credible. What they have, their education, their information is credible. Trying to compare that to something like just people that's stumbling across information from, this read or that read or that read, it doesn't necessarily have to deal with like the conservative values of America. And I feel like America, for the most part, is a very conservative country, because People want to protect their children. People want to adhere to family values and all these things that's very important to them. Nobody, you got a lot of people that really don't like all that buck wild shit. They don't think it's cool. They don't think it's classy. They don't think it's clean, and they really don't like none of that shit. Like they really hate that shit. So when you think about it, when you think about like these democratic places or these liberal minded places, I mean, this whole this whole liberated sense of living that has came about the last couple of years, I'll say. What has been, well, in my lifetime, like with the homosexual community, the LBGTQ community, and all these things, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, people that's that's speaking up and standing out for what they believe. I feel like that whole conversation of like that liberality is just like is representing something that's not necessarily just left wing. It's kind of like a product of what the right stands for. Because the right has spent so much time in this country being very conservative, I'll say over the last 50 years. I'll just put it out there like that. They've been very conservative, standing for what they believe in, not backing off of it, not changing their narrative at all. And that's all they care about is that traditional sense of what they believe in. And when it comes to like this democratic side of things, what do Democrats actually stand for? I feel like that's what we need to we really need somebody to bring that up, or I need somebody to explain that to me, like what is their motive? Because we look at Democrats like they're representing like this liberal sense of things, but I feel like they haven't really cemented themselves in this country, and it's been a long time. Like you take people like JFK, who was assassinated, right? And they talk about how he was doing all these things, how he was finna expose the deep state or whatever was going on back then. And you don't really hear about a like, well, I'm a young guy, so I don't really know any other prominent Democratic presidents, but you hear about Bill Clinton. And the things that I hear about Bill Clinton are completely ignorant sometimes. I hate, like, like they never really represent him like as somebody that actually did something. They're always talking about, well, black people love Bill Clinton. He was an honorary black guy. Like, I don't want to hear no shit like that. What did he actually do? Or, what I'm saying? It's just like, it's things like that. So or Obama, like creditable Democrats in the last let's see, 15, 20 years, or 30 years. And you hear about Obama, oh, first black president, and that's all you ever hear about him. And you never hear about the things that he really did, or in his campaign, the things that he did foreignly, domestically. Like, nobody brings these things up and try to, we have to connect with each other generationally, especially when we're talking about presidents in this country. People that come from Pacific times, like Steve, or Cody, um, or even Palu, who's a little older than me. Like there's probably one president that you know about that I know nothing about. You know what I'm saying? At all. Like, I know Clinton, I know that Clinton era, I know that Clinton era on down, on forward. That's all I know. And it's just crazy because we really need to like I said, I'll say that I'll finish it off with this. I feel like this country is conservative. It's like, that's why when Trump came in, he was able, since he was representing the Republican Party, he was able to cement who he was so much, because it just like for the new generation, he brought in an era of saying, we conservative people control this country. They really do. They Their values are too cemented in what's right. And when those people stormed the Capitol and whatnot, people want to say that was like, oh, those people were like right, like far right, like what the hell they was calling them, these alt right people. They kept calling them alt righters. And I don't want to justify what they did, but I feel like most of those people were just people that believe in these conservative things. Like, they probably don't like fucking sex offenders. They probably hate shit like that. They probably hate like like when you really think about these people, they probably even though Trump was who was representing them, I don't even think that it was about them being Trumpers. They were just like, okay, Trump represents the Republican Party, so we're siding with him because we're conservatives. Like, and that is a conservative mindset is more of a Republican thing. So it's just like, okay, you're not gonna get the best candidate that you want. It's just that Trump represented the Republican Party. So as them being Republicans and conservatives, they rode with him. They stuck with him. You know what I'm saying? And even though he wasn't the most perfect guy, they was like, shit, we're gonna roll with him. We're gonna stick with him. And that just shows um the loyalty inside of that party. And that's something that you don't see amongst the Democratic Party, really. I mean,
It's the ignorance of voting the party line, dude.
right.
It's a pernicious way of voting. But if I can interject here, because I'm going to actually head out because I got some stuff I've got to do. The problem that I see the most frequently really is the lack of understanding of really, we can discuss the roots of our country in slavery, sure, but what we don't discuss is the roots of our country in the ideology that it was created, which was liberalism. The word liberal, the root definition of the word liberal is liberty, right? And it was co-opted by conservatives during the 1980s to kind of shit on lefties. But when we look at it, and this is the biggest criticism I have of the right, really, is our country was founded with the belief that you can believe whatever you want. We literally came here for that purpose. And so to tell me that I can't believe in the fundamental goodness of human beings when they fall along the lines of the LGBTQ community, I think is disingenuous on the part of conservatives. And that's my criticism for them. The other criticism I have is what I consistently see is conservatives making the accusation that LGBTQ folks or leftists in general support the idea of minor attracted people or pedophiles within our ranks. We don't.
Yeah.
I am embedded with lefties, and I love my lefties. I have trans friends, I have gay friends, I have gay family. Right? None of these people have ever once advocated for that and have actively advocated against allowing minor attracted people or pedophiles into the ranks of the LGBTQ plus community. It's never going to fucking happen. And this is another viewpoint where you can look at the process of what othering looks like in the act of it.
I would also like to expand a bit more too and ask, what do we mean when we talk about conservatism? Because Unpopular said this is a conservative country. I would then want to ask what is meant by conservative, because see, when we're talking about, as was mentioned before, what's the distinctions between Democrat and Republican? The main ones I would make is focus on cultural and religious issues, which the Republicans do completely. They want, I don't really see much difference in policies on economic reforms between the parties, but policies in regards to cultural norms and religious norms, the Republicans seem to want to try to enforce cultural and religious norms in policy. And I think that's what happened, on January 6th. That was an uprising of people who believe that their cultural and religious norms should be the standard throughout the country, and that should be enforced some way.
No. That was a group of people that believed that the election had been rigged and were demanding that the freaking process get put back until the election could be investigated.
Well, that was the excuse, but the main motivation, again, was belief that they thought it was stolen because they thought that the majority of people were in favor of their cultural and religious views, and that would have been expressed through votes, but it wasn't.
All right. I think
no, it was a product of literally video coming out from Michigan, covering up windows, kicking poll watchers out. That came from Georgia,
because there were people attacking the polls in Detroit. I remember that.
Hidden packages.
Pure and
simple,
guys,
there was too much shady crap to ignore. Then there was the quote-unquote night stoppage that suddenly saw Joe Biden jump up like an hour after it was supposed to have stopped.
Hello?
So this point we're making now, I think we're going to have to reserve it for another stream. This is 2 hours 14 minutes down the line. So let's wrap up this conversation here. I think we made some very important points today, and on the on a basic level, I think we are all sort of agreed on certain things. Maybe we may be differing on, how to go about these things, but basically everybody wants the best outcome for their country and all that. So as regards the topic, Mr. Pelu, you go unpopular, Cody, Stanley, then E, then we will be done for today. So Mr. Pelu.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a great conversation, and I just want to say that it was on Steve phone, but Steve left before I was able to say I was in there to talk. But yeah, I know the Americans find liberalism, but it was founded on classical liberalism. Like even me, I'm a classical liberal, but unfortunately, the word has been co-opted by. I mean, is being used to mark a certain type of people. Now, I don't know who started doing the co-opting, but yeah, but I know in conservative circles we still use the word classical liberalism. But of course, like right now in modern times, in modern times, classical liberalism is just what you would call moderate libertarianism today. That's basically what classical liberalism is. So I do think we have to get back to our liberal roots. Because if you look at classical liberalism, it comes from the same. It's built on the knowledge that separates a free man from a slave. That's what liberal education does. That's what classical liberalism is. It was an education that separated a free man from a slave. So I think that's what we need to get back to. We need to get back to our logic, and part of that is logic. We need to get back to our logic, and that's how we're able to decipher the things that we need to make better policies. Then to get back to all the skills that we have developed to make us a free people. And that's the beautiful thing about America. That's the beautiful thing about the English tradition in general, even before America, from the time of the Magna Carta. So thank you very much for having me. Great conversation. Bye bye.
Thank you, Mr. Pelu. Unpopular.
Yeah, I guess my final statements is just like, I'll piggyback off what Paylo was just saying, a little bit. Um, you know, I feel like there's this division going on between who believes how this country was originally, how it was originally looked at. Like when you look at the liberal situation of it or the conservative situation of it. And I feel like a lot of that shit dates back to a time that we try to, not to that we try to not reminisce on, but like back in the 1800s and whatnot. But I'll end it with this. Right now, you have to choose what side you're on, and that's the beauty of it. And the middle ground is not a safe area to be because I guess on this political scale of how things are playing out, you kind of have to you could teeter between both sides when you're trying to explain your stance. But at the end of the day, depending on how you live your life and depending on the detriment of how you live your life, you're going to have to choose a side. And that's why I am choosing to be conservative.
Thank you, unpopular. Cody.
See, why don't I let Stanley go before me? Because I know they were sitting in the back room for a while and they probably wanted to share a few things. So, Stanley, why don't you go and then I'll go.
All right,
Yeah,
sir.
luckily I wrote them down this time. Um, Classical liberalism, okay, associated with liberty. I'm sure it was, but it wasn't liberty for all. Classical liberalism lost its validity, at least in my black community, when they didn't give everybody liberty. So I have huge problems with it. I have huge problems with people who want to claim it today as some, panacea. It created the problem, quite frankly. Next is media. The problem isn't the media. The problem is the consumers of said media. Othering, I think, is really the base problem. It's the root of extremism. It's the root of cancel culture. Othering, everybody does it, and they should stop. Presidents, if you want to know about a president, there are tons of books out there. Read a couple. As far as choosing a side, um, Back when I was a kid, the only side was the American side. The problem is the approach. The side is American. That's all I got.
No,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Stanley. Very well put. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Cuddy.
see, in my case, I don't really go for side choosing because I understand there's a lot of false dichotomies that exist in the minds of many people, and I don't want to reinforce that. That's why I mostly label myself as independent. But when it comes to important issues, yeah, see, I will take sides if need be.
better
See,
yet, better yet, free to choose.
indeed.
Milton Friedman.
And in regards to the main topic of the conversation, I know that we went on different tangents, but in regards to cancel culture, I think that we need to understand that that's a petrol term, and what people lump under cancel culture will probably be called by different names in the future. But I think that we need to focus on the using shame and harassment in order to change people's minds does more harm than good because I myself was raised in a culture that I myself would call very conservative that used shame in order to try to influence my behavior. And that's why I turned against that culture in general. So, I think that we need to understand that a lot of the things that are labeled under cancel culture have to do with attempts in order to try to change people's behavior. And there are more positive ways of trying to do that. And that this country, I don't know, the United States or the landmass that makes up what's called the United States has always been populated by culturally diverse groups of people and always will be, and that people should understand that and accept it, and that understand that the not everyone is going to live the same lifestyle, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Cody, for that. So, um, E, you go last.
Okay. Um, Basically, I'd like to say this. We are getting Saul Alinsky. Look up his book, 12 Rules for Radicals, and read everything in it. Tell me that this is not the stuff they're pulling on us. And the Rules for Radicals was literally made for Marxist takeovers.
All right. Is that your final take for today? E.
Yep. I mean, pure
Okay.
and simple, it's literally happening to us as we're sitting here talking and debating whether it is.
All right. So,
And
go
and we
ahead.
need
Finish
to
your thought.
shut it down and make sure it's not going to happen again.
Mm, mm, mm. So, E, thank you very much for coming to this conversation today. I really enjoyed your points. You made some good points. I agreed with some. I didn't agree with some, but on the whole, it was a rounded conversation. I saw where you were coming from. I saw what your concerns were, and yeah, I understood why those things would be concerns. Speaking about Hollywood, I think it's a very big tool of culture, of passing a message, of acculturating people. At least from where I'm from, I know that Hollywood has very huge influences in trying to shape culture. So if anyone is trying to change American culture and they're doing it through Hollywood, it might be a cause for concern if those changes are not organic, if those changes are being manufactured from outside and with the aim to undermine America. So that would be a cause for concern. So in that sense, the last point I wanted to touch on was as regards censorship, and we talked about Mouse and that book and all that. So my point, which is the point that I had made earlier, is yes, I believe anybody should be able to do whatever they want as long as you're an adult. But for children, parents have a lot to they have a lot of say to determine whatever happens with their kids, what their kids are going to be taught. So they do have the right to say, okay, this is not age appropriate at this time for my kid. Could you take it out so that the kids are not exposed to influences that they are not mature enough to handle. And it's not a
Can I
critique.
can
It's
I
not
make
a
one point about the books? When I was a junior in high school, I dumbly didn't want to read. I think it was Mark Twain's. I can't even remember which one. It's the one that uses the N word. And I talked to my teacher about it, and she let me read another Mark Twain book. So, I mean,
Huckleberry
there
Finn.
are arrangements that can be made.
yeah, but that's just you. I mean, how many other kids would do what you did? So
Well,
we can't use the exception as a rule.
What
well,
about reading Mark Twain? Hey, we reading words. You mean reading books with the N word in it?
um, gosh, Huck Finn has the N
No,
word in it.
no, I know a lot of books do. Like for example, even Fences does. Look, I remember when I was in high school, we was reading Fences. It was right before the movie came out, and then we had a white teacher, and she was saying the N word all the time. But ain't nobody got mad because it's part of the book, even though the whole class was black.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
I was in my young radical phase, so I was just being probably obnoxious. I wouldn't do it today, but my teacher accommodated me. So,
Well, yeah, but that's good. I get it, but yeah, it depends the level because I remember. I read Huck Finn and stuff and Tom Sawyer, but I think when I was reading those as we were young, we had to. It might have been the bridge version, but anyway, but yeah, it's part of literature. Part of literature is part of history, but I don't think they should take away the word if it was part of if that word was used historically, because that's like making the kids not even know the historicity of reality.
well, no, I'm not saying censor it. I'm saying I went on one and expressed my concerns. I mean, I'm surprised I was that mature. I didn't make a stink about it.
All right. So thank you all for coming to this conversation today. Thank you, Mr. Pelo, Steve, Unpopular, Cody, Stanley, E. Thank you so much for all those who viewed. Dr. Mason, thank you for your contribution. Brad, thank you for your contribution. And for all those who continue to support this podcast, I really, really appreciate you guys. And especially to my patron, Steve Jared Jordan. Thank you very much for your support. So I'll catch you in another live stream. So it's good night for now. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
All right, peace out, peace out.
All right, see everybody later.